Hello everyone, welcome to today's Halloween review. Today we'll be watching The 39 Steps, a mystery thriller directed by Alfred Hitchcock that fits oh so nicely into the film noir genre and starring Robert Donat of the Count of Monte Cristo fame. The movie begins with Richard Hannay enjoying a show performed by Mr. Memory, who seems to remember anything he decides to memorize and has left his brain to the British Museum. During the performance, gunshots are fired and everyone begins to panic and rush out. As Richard tries to leave, a frightened Annabella clings to him and convinces him to bring her back to his home. They catch a bus, and when they arrive at Richard's home, Annabella decides to reveal that she is a spy and that she fired the shots because she was being followed by assassins and is trying to stop a plot to steal British military secrets. Late that night, Annabella is stabbed in the back, and Richard takes a map from her hand and sneaks out, dressed as a milkman, then boards a train to Scotland where the military secrets are supposed to be. A newspaper he sees shows he's part of a manhunt for Annabella's murder. He evades the police by kissing a woman named Pamela as the police check the train cars, but Pamela forces Richard off and calls for the police. Richard escapes by jumping off the train and onto a bridge. He stays with a poor farmer and his wife who recognize Richard from the newspaper. The farmer tries to turn Richard in, but his wife helps him escape by dressing him up in some of the farmer's clothes. He finally arrives in the village he was traveling to and heads to an estate where the person he was supposed to meet lives. There's a party going on at the estate, but the maid and estate owner both lie to the police about seeing him when he mentions Annabella. Richard tells his story to the estate owner, Professor Jordan, who he finds out is missing a joint on his pinky finger. This was the man Annabella warned him about. Jordan shoots Richard, but the bullet is stopped by a hymnal in the farmer's jacket that Richard is wearing. Richard makes his way to the sheriff by stealing the professor's car. The sheriff doesn't believe his story, and instead, he arrests Richard for Annabella's murder. He escapes through a window and by blending into a parade. He stumbles into a political meeting and ends up having to give a speech where he recognizes Pamela. Pamela also recognizes Richard and alerts the two men she thinks are police. Richard realizes the men are police when they take the wrong turn to the police station. The men handcuff Richard and Pamela together when they have to move some sheep from blocking the road. Richard escapes with an unwilling Pamela, and they hide from the men under a bridge and then later behind a waterfall. The pair eventually find an inn to stay at for the night. The innkeeper's wife thinks they are runaway lovers, so she covers for them when the men pretending to be the police come asking after them. Pamela slips out of the handcuffs in the night and starts to escape, but she overhears the spies talking on the telephone downstairs, which confirms Richard's innocence. She returns to the room and sleeps on the couch. Before they leave the next morning, Pamela visits Scotland Yard to tell them of the plot. When they arrive in London, Scotland Yard doesn't believe her story and instead follow her back to Richard. Pamela meets Richard at the Mr. Memory show. As the show begins, the music from Mr. Memory's show is something that Richard's been hearing over the past few days and couldn't get out of his head, and he finally realizes that Mr. Memory is the method by which the military secrets are being smuggled out of the country. As the police try to arrest Richard, he shouts out a question and asks, "What are the 39 steps?" Mr. Memory answers compulsively, explaining that the 39 Steps is a spy organization that collects information for foreign offices. He is shot by Professor Jordan before he can finish. As Mr. Memory dies, Jordan and Pamela's hands holding each other are the last thing we see. And thus ends the movie. The 39 Steps is an enjoyable thriller with superior cinematography and acting, not only for its time, but even by today's standards. The story is actually fairly solid, though the bit about Mr. Memory is where it finds its hokey twist. Even the parade trope is better used than most movies since it's not a bombastic thing, but more of a protest march. This is one of the few movies of the era that I can recommend heartily. It's not quite horror, but it is a decent thriller for its era. It can actually manage to keep your interest for most of its runtime. It does drag a bit in some parts, but otherwise it's very good. Definitely give it a watch if you have the chance and have the time. That'll do it for today's Halloween review. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving the video a like. If not, please give it a dislike and let me know why in the comments. I hope you all have a great day, and as always, stay positive.